I am a libertarian who believes that we have a lot more in common with conservatives than we do with liberals, especially now after liberals have abandoned completely their prior positions on things like free speech and due process. In short, I guess that makes me a big tent libertarian, as long as you use the word libertarian to describe actual liberty. Unlike some alleged branches of this movement whose stated purpose is to use liberty to enslave. How's that for a contradiction in terms? Now, I have a huge amount of respect for those calling themselves anarcho-capitalists. They believe that any government structure of any kind will eventually become bloated, controlling, and corrupt. It doesn't matter what form of government it is, say the ANCAPs. It doesn't matter if it's military. It doesn't matter if it's the police or if it's the judicial system. In the end, it will become a destructive force for humanity. That's a pretty darn good argument. But the problem is, a big problem, is that a practical matter, human rights, by any reasonable definition, would not exist in an ANCAP society. They point to something called the non-aggression principle, which is supposed to prevent initiation of force in an ANCAP society. But as a voluntary principle, not an enforceable right, in my opinion, it doesn't carry much weight. In an ANCAP society, your ability to protect yourself from attack would be dependent upon your willingness and ability to either protect yourself and your property physically or to hire somebody else to do it for you. If you can't protect yourself and you cannot hire somebody else to do it for you, you effectively have no rights. ANCAPs counter that in today's world with corrupt police, politicians, and judges, you really have no rights anyway. Again, good point, but in my opinion, not entirely true. Today, in America, if you're murdered, no matter who you are, who your friends are, what you can afford, there will be an investigation, and there is a decent chance, and yes, the likelihood of successful prosecution does depend on who you are, but there's a decent chance that the perpetrator will be caught. The odds of the perpetrator being caught have been plummeting in recent decades, and there could be a point at which they become meaningless. We're not there yet. Now, in an ANCAP society, there would likely be many cases where a murder occurred and literally nothing happened. If there's no estate or family or friends with the means to pursue justice, the matter would just drop. This means, in my opinion, that that person had literally no right to life. That's a very slippery slope to a hugely dysfunctional society. Now, I've taken a look at the data like I usually do, and the data for societies approaching anarchy is not promising. Some of the countries in the world with the smallest governments are also the poorest, sickest, and most miserable. Small government alone is not enough to create a free society. The data tells us that the rule of law is an important ingredient in a functioning society in today's world. Again, that could change at some point in the future, but that's where things stand right now. Here's the way I think about this issue, and it's backed up by the current data on what works best for humans. We are born into this life with many rights and one obligation. That obligation is to protect the weak from the initiation of force or fraud. This is an obligation. It's not an option. And it must be ensured by forced taxation of some type. I'm not sure the exact type is all that important because the amount required would be a small blip in today's budget, now north of $6 trillion in America. Now, it's absolutely true that many people, probably most people, would be better off if there were no laws and no government of any kind. Probably most of the people who watch this channel would be better off. We would hire our own security forces and protect our own legal interests, and we would get much better protection and representation than we do today because the people we would be hiring would be subject to market forces, which is the most powerful force for human progress in the history of mankind. However, the people who would be left behind in this kind of a system would be left behind in a way that I think is inconceivable to most of us today. I think that we are heading toward a breaking point where society will splinter into the systems that individuals think are best for them. That would probably be for the best, much like America's state-by-state system, which acts like a proving ground for which systems work and which don't. It would be academically interesting to me to know if a lawless society, a truly lawless society, would be best. I have my opinions on the subject, but it would be nice to know for sure.